let's get a start promptly. So, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us to talk about how the UK's smartest businesses find and keep the best people. So, if you don't want smart people in your business, you've joined the wrong webinar. So, let's get going. I will love to start by introducing my guests. And here you are. Here's their faces. I've got them for you already on the screen, in fact. Doing special things with my slides. So I've got Hayley Murfitt with me, who is a director at EA First. Hayley brings nearly 2 decades of experience in recruitment and talent acquisition, helping organizations attract, engage, and retain exceptional people through smarter hiring strategies and a deep understanding of today's talent market. I've got Ben Birchill, who's a fractional chief people officer with People Puzzles. Ben is a seasoned people leader with more than 25 years of experience helping growing businesses navigate change, build high-performing teams, and create people strategies that drive commercial success, helping to achieve things like Sunday Times Top Companies to Work For awards. And I've got Vicky Leslie Reardon, who's a client growth director at Partners and I mean, we're really talking about lots of decades here, aren't we? I think we're going to add up to 100 in a minute. Vicky has spent over 20 years helping organizations design employee benefits and well-being strategies that strengthen engagement, support retention, and create a better experience for their people. So welcome to all three of you. Thank you very much for joining me. As we go through, if you've got any questions, please pop them in the chat box and we'll try and answer them either as we go through or at the end or by email afterwards if we run out of time. So to get things started and to make sure you're not all falling asleep already with your sandwich, I've got a little poll that I want to share with you. So here we go. I've launched my poll. You've got 4 questions. So the first one is, this morning I went on LinkedIn where you can see the applications. How many applications do you think you get for a London office manager job? So just a sort of fairly generic job, just 6 days old on LinkedIn. Tell me how many applications you think you might expect in that first 6 days. As you go down, hopefully, can you all see the poll? I guess, yeah, good. I've got some nods from my panelists. I haven't got anyone replying yet. So here we go. Maybe you need a bit of thinking time. What about the cost of a senior hire? How much do you think the turnover of a senior hire costs? I've got some data behind this. Then I'd like you to have a quick go at rating yourself. How good do you think your current employer value proposition is? So how you present yourself to prospective candidates and what it's like to work with you. And then finally, there's a multiple choice on what do you think is your biggest people challenge? So have a go. I'm going to leave that poll up for a couple of minutes while we start answering some questions, and then we'll have a look at that a bit later. Okay, so let's start with the big picture and thinking strategically about our teams, our employees, our people. It can be fairly easy to get bums on seats when we're running a recruitment process, but it's really significantly different if we're trying to find and keep the best people for the role in our organization. Those people who will make a significant difference to how successful our business is, either now or in the future. And you can think, can't you, quickly about the difference between a salesperson that brings in £20,000 worth of work a year and that salesperson who brings in £1 million. It can be really significant, the difference between poor and great performers. So, Ben, I'm going to start with you. You often work with leadership teams who are in firefighting mode, just trying to plug holes in the business. Can you give us an example of a business that you've worked with that actually took a step back to rethink their structure and then started designing for the future rather than just for sort of this panic?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, well, first to reinforce that, yeah, most clients that I go into are closer to firefighting mode than not. Yeah, so if that's where you are, that's not an unusual place to be. A good example of a business. So I worked with a manufacturing business when I came in. They'd had some rapid growth, gone from 50 employees to 100 over 3 years. And recruitment was something they were doing a lot of. The owner was still quite involved in that recruitment process, even at that size. And we're in the weeds. every time an employee left the business, the answer was to recruit a new one. Every time demand increased, the answer was to increase the headcount. It was just a simple, non-thought through formula. That was the reaction to those situations. So what we help them to do is I encourage them to step back, look at where they're going to be in the next 1 to 2 years' time, start looking at the horizon a little bit more. So we started to introduce a clear sort of workforce planning approach, better delegation within the workforce as well. So we're looking at the workforce plan, but actually looking at the job design, the work that people were doing was actually creating problems that there didn't need to be for recruitment if we just reallocated the work a bit. And there were some capability gaps as well. So we focused on redesigning job roles, developing internal talent, and looking at the 12 months from implementing that, we saved about 10 hires than taking the previous approach. You're just thinking things through, looking at what the business actually needs, and then looking at that year ahead. Their revenue grew, their decision making was much faster. We got rid of this bottleneck in the middle because we'd redesigned the middle management roles. So it wasn't just about bums on seats, it was about what those people were doing. So yeah, looking ahead, looking at the horizon, rather than looking in the weeds when people leave. That was the key change with that business, actually. The thing that we kind of culturally shifted, I think, was when somebody left, the question was asked of what do we need rather than how do we get a new one. And that was a key change.
Yeah, and saving 10 employees, salaries and all the
Yeah,
complexity that goes with 10 extra people is really significant, isn't it? Thanks, Ben.
absolutely.
Hayley, from your seat in the recruitment market, what have you seen happen when a client truly knows what good looks like before they start the hiring process? And have you got any examples for us of where that clarity has changed the outcome?
Yes, thanks, Sally. I feel like with this question, there's so many things I could talk about, but I've obviously had to narrow it down a bit. But I think the big thing is the clarity piece. And I think that comes from really good alignment along the SLT in terms of what the hire should look like. And in terms of kind of the planning and execution of the recruitment process, really, I think without those key things, it's going to be tricky to always get who you want in the business and also, most importantly, get the best talent. So I think that's really important. So the definition of what you need, defining what you need and being very clear about what you need early doors is super good. In terms of an example, there's many I can think of, but I guess one that springs to mind is when we get involved early doors in the process and we can offer that consultative advice around what the job title should be, what the salary should look like, and how they need to approach the market. We can do that by either working kind of exclusively or retained. But when you have that investment from a client on a recruitment perspective, it really helps because we can get involved kind of 3 steps behind before they launch, and we can really be on hand to truly partner with them in a way where it's going to be useful. So that for me is when processes have worked best. When you have the SLT alignment, they take on board what you're saying, knowing that you're good at what you do. And yeah, the processes then run much more smoothly than them going to market themselves, trying it, and then coming back to an agency second.
Yeah, I think I've really seen when you're a mid-sized business, sometimes you don't know if you want someone who's sort of manager level or someone who's executive level or, someone who's even sort of starting out. And I think those discussions to really work out how senior you need someone, what level of responsibility they should take. You're right, it's
Yes.
a discussion. And then that support around salary bands and things like that is invaluable because it's external knowledge that you need to get from somewhere.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, thank you. Vicky, you are, of course, talking to employees all the time about their people and benefits strategy. What mistakes do you see when people don't think ahead? And have you got an example for us about aligning employee well-being with business goals and that being valuable?
Yeah, I think definitely one of the biggest mistakes that companies tend to make in terms of their benefit structure is not revisiting their benefits. So their workforce changes, employee expectations change. I mean, look at the world now. Obviously, it's changing constantly, and the business itself changes, but the benefit package stays the same. So I'll often say, as part of my sort of discovery questions, when was the last time you reviewed your benefits? And it's usually not since I've been here, or it's been years. And of course, regular reviews and benchmarking are really important, because what employees valued previously, their lives have changed and they've moved on, as the world has as well. So what was important to them isn't maybe what they're valuing now. There are things like greater demand for remote services, for example, as you can appreciate since COVID, people being able to access, I call it armchair healthcare. They're there of an evening outside of working hours, and they're able to actually access what they need from their employee benefits at that point. We weren't talking about menopause support 5 years ago, but now we are. There are all these aspects that I think need to be considered. And the risk of not thinking ahead is that you can then be spending significant amounts of money on benefits that either aren't being used by your employees or aren't valued by them. So you're missing a real opportunity to support your employees and actually get the most out of your benefits package. Regarding an example, there's quite a few I can give around certain areas. If you think like musculoskeletal, where you've got maybe like a workforce that is obviously quite physical. But one that really stands out for me was a client who had noticed an increase in their absence. And so we started doing a review, and we looked at the demographic, and we did some research investigation, and realized they had a really large number of employees that were sitting in that sandwich generation, where they had young children, but they were also now having elderly parents that they were looking after. So not only were they then being a parent, but they were being a carer. And the elder care system can be really confusing and very stressful when obviously you're trying to manage that with everything else. So we were able to then to implement an elder care policy, and we recognised that they did already have an employee assistance programme that they didn't even know that they had, that wasn't being communicated. So by utilising those two benefits and really driving them, communicating them, letting the employees know where they could go for support, when they did then their employee survey a year later, they had really good feedback from that, and we'd noticed then a reduction in the absence rates. So really understanding their benefit program really helped them drive it forward and bring it up to where it needed to be to service their employees as they were at that time, not what they needed before.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because we know the world's changing really fast, and we're all embracing it in, AI and the way we're approaching work, etc. But actually, even with something like a job vacancy, we sort of have to take it as a blank sheet of paper. We have to start with the job, what the company's trying to build, what's changed since the last time they hired. Thanks, Ben, for all of that. Then there's the approach and how you work with your people helping you with recruitment, and getting that brief right and the clarity. And then there's the perks and the benefits and the sort of why us, and using all of that together. It's definitely not as simple as just rinse and repeat last year's job advert. So yeah.
It feels to me, Ali, like now more than ever, with the changes post-COVID and employees' expectations about what the workplace needs to be and what benefits should look like, etc. And with the introduction of AI and a greater focus needed on what people actually do within their job, and challenging that a little bit, this should be at the top of people's agendas, I think.
Yeah. And we haven't even talked yet, maybe we will a bit later, about the different generations in the workplace. And, you talked about the sandwich generation, Vicky, but we know that those 20-year-olds coming into the workforce need something totally different from us. And their expectations of work and what support they're going to have is a different level again. Oh, isn't it fun being an employer in 2026? I'm going to shut the poll now, and I'm going to just share the results with you quickly. Can we see this? Yes, great. So I'll give you the answer to question one. How many job applications did you get for a London office manager in 6 days? Over 100. Well done. It's pretty good answers on that one. 64% of you are correct. Cost of a senior hire. I'm really disappointed. Only one person out of 25 got that right. So the average cost of replacing a senior hire is 213%. That is quite astonishing, isn't it? We don't realise quite the impact of asking, somebody to leave a senior position and then going on that journey of hiring someone new. that figure obviously takes into account how long people are not effective for, and you know, there's sort of retraining period. But it does really show why smart businesses are making sure they're hiring the right senior hires straight away and then retaining them. So 213% of salary is the statistic for that one. Then rating ourselves for current EVP, we've got quite, you know, 3 out of 5, the classic normal curve distribution I think we've got here, but hopefully you'll come away today with some really good ideas about how to think about and improve that employer value proposition. And then we've got some things about here. What do we think our biggest people challenges are? Definitely recruiting great people, and then some skills and building that team for the future. So thank you everybody that filled in the poll. Really interesting insights into what's going on in your businesses. So I'll stop that for now. Okay, let's go on to attracting the best. So this EVP, employer value proposition, hard to say. Everyone loves a 3-letter acronym, don't they? But we've talked about clarity being key. But let's talk about what happens when you hit go on hiring. So let's assume there's a good job advert. You found a good place to advertise it, and you've got all the associated information somebody might need to apply. Now, in a world of Indeed, apply in one click, no personalization of applications, and then AI, automated screening, and hundreds of CVs. How do you stand out? And as an employer, how do you select and try and find that person that's really going to add value to your business? So, Hayley, I'm going to start with you, the recruitment expert. You handle searches at all levels. Can you tell us about a time when you have helped an employer stand out? Maybe the brand or the process, you know, where a candidate wants to join.
Yeah. So I do think this starts early on in the process, right really at the point of advertising. And I think there's a couple of points that I'd like to raise here. One of them is the quality of the advert, but also linking in there more about the company culture and values. Values I'm seeing a lot about at the moment. It's something that comes up a lot from candidates. They want to know more about their alignment to the company's values and how that compares to theirs. So I think that's important to get across when you're doing your advertising. But equally, I think in a lot of cases, if you are going to be joining a line manager or an owner that is really inspirational, that's also something that you should be sharing. Some of the best advert responses we've had is when we're talking about the reputation and, you know, that person's connection within the market. So I think that's really important to raise as well. And equally, from our point of view, I think it's good questions behind the advert point, because that is how we can then best represent the company when we take that role to market. And it's also thinking about other things like, you know, what is the prospects in terms of development with the role? It's thinking more about, you know, is there an exciting project coming up? Is there an implementation coming up? How can you kind of entice the right caliber of candidate to the advert? And then, of course, all the pre-screening comes, and beyond that, we get into the detail more. But that would be the quick summary in answer to your question, Ali.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I've been looking at this and thinking about this for more than 10 years, and it's never occurred to me that an inspirational person in the business would add. So there we go. I'm learning something, which is fantastic. Ben, many leaders blame the market when they can't find good people, but often the issue sits somewhere else, doesn't it? Inside the process or within the company. How do you help companies find the right people?
Yeah, I would say that's kind of like the easy line is, you know, that's the market's not great at the moment for this job, and you hear it a lot, and I think it feels like a bit of a throwaway comment and just an easy excuse a lot of the time. Yeah, I think for me the key here, kind of coming off the last point really, is around clarity in the advert, without a doubt. So being really clear about looking, definitely the values piece. The bit that you were talking about, Haley, with regards to projects and stuff like that resonates with me around impact. If we can try and enable somebody to understand the impact they're going to make within an organization, it's very different to a list of jobs and tasks that they're going to do, which is traditionally what we've seen and continue to see. So I've got a manufacturing client I was working with, and they've got this problem at a supervisor level. So we kind of dug into it, had a look at the whole process and what was going on. They advert was basically a shopping list of tasks that supervisor would do. The interview was really focused on technical skills, but they weren't assessing their supervisory skills. So they weren't looking at, we kind of narrowed it down and started to look at that job role and identify that there's a need to organize work, coach others, communicate effectively. And when we started to pick those things out and redesign the advert based on the impact they would be making in their role in those areas, yeah, there had to be a base level of technical understanding and knowledge, but they didn't have to be the most technical person. They had to be best at those things. And in rewriting that advert, we started to attract, funnily enough, the people who could do that job well, and weren't just chasing the money. And I think that's sometimes the difficulty we've got in this environment, because one of the things I would always say is, write your adverts that in the way that enable people to deselect themselves at the right stage. Although I think we might be in a market, and you might tell me this, Hayley, but people will kind of throw their CV at anything because it's easy to. So they're maybe not even thinking that hard about that. But so as employers, we have to look at how we motivate and engage people around the impact they're going to make, I think, within the business, and then drive the interview process around that as well, and selection process.
It's Ben, an interesting question's just come in. I'm going to ask you on the spot. How do you keep an advert succinct and easy to keep attention on, but so not losing the detail and the uniqueness and the environment, but obviously people are often reading on their phones, they're scrolling through, they're swiping. I'm not sure it's a swipe left or right for a job advert yet, is it? Hopefully not.
Depends what you're advertising for. Yeah.
But how do how do you get enough in without it being pages and pages?
I think, well, more is less. Absolutely. I think we, because we got so much ownership around that job role and all the details really important, we think that everything needs to go in there. But actually, this is a marketing piece. This is how do we capture attention? And I think coming back to values and impact, probably the things. What do you really want to get out of the people who are going to come and sit in front of you? And fundamentally, if they're the right person, they will know the detail that sits behind it, or they'll go onto your website and they'll go and find out more. So we can have layers and layers, but from an advert perspective, less is more, and think about the impact that we want them to have in the business, and that's what we want to attract them against.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Ben. Vicky, it's easy for businesses to promise flexibility, isn't it? And great benefits and well-being, and think that can make up their employer value proposition. But it can be harder to back that stuff up. Can you give us an example of a client who actually had a really standout offer, and did it help?
Yeah, coming back to sort of both Ben and Hayley's point in terms of that value piece, where people are looking then to feel valued, and benefits often will reflect the values of the business and then how they value their employees as well. But I think one of the greatest challenges is, and this comes to a point that you made as well, Ali, is everybody's different. So if you look at even the people on this call, male, female, different hair colors, different stages of life. So as an employer, how do I make sure that I'm not just looking at one section of my employee population and saying, well, that's great. It's about recognizing you can't be everything to everyone, but also trying very hard to ensure that you're engaging and supporting all of your employees at some point in their journey. So I can think of a client who was really looking at that evaluation piece and thinking, how do we deliver on what we're saying? And they really looked at choice being an ultimate part of that. And this actually goes back to research that we know, the Net Promoter Score, which people may well be aware of. So the NPS for benefits, when that was last done, showed that where there is no choice in benefits, so it's regardless of the richness or the level of benefits and how generous, but where there's no choice, the Net Promoter Score actually came down to -43, which is significantly outside of the 0 to 20 score that it should be. But where there was choice that was available, which obviously could reflect different people at different stages in their life, then the Net Promoter Score came up to 13. So I think they were then able to recognise that we can now look at the right options for our employees rather than just we're doing this and it's a yes or no. And if you think, Ali, I would love to take you this evening to a Michelin star restaurant, I really would. I don't think I probably can. But if I said to you, come with me, but there is only one thing on the menu, the fact that it was Michelin star, you might think, but I don't want to eat that today, or that's not what the kind of food that I like. But if we went to another restaurant, not quite Michelin star, but still good, but there's 10 things on the menu, you're much more likely to engage, enjoy that experience, and feel like it gave you what you wanted. So the next point after that was then communication, because it's great to have this choice and be able to support your employees at these different stages of their life, those moments that matter, whether that be I'm early 20s, I'm going to the gym, I'm maybe slightly older and maybe I'm looking at starting a family, buying my first house, I'm a little bit older still, I'm looking at my pension maybe. So they were reinforcing all of these aspects through communications. And they then put a platform in that was a mobile app platform, which again means that people could just access it when it was convenient for them. It allowed them to look at all the documentation, everything was kept in one place, they could ask questions. And as a result of that, they saw then improvements in engagement, retention, and then they were able to use that when they were looking at bringing people on board and talking to them about part of their value being how they supported the employees. So it highlights the difference between a benefits package and a true employee value proposition. One's a list of benefits, but the others are actually what the employees experience day to day. And that's what works.
Yeah, it's interesting because, when I talk to my friends, if they're looking for a new job, they'll go through that first phase, get through first round interview, but then that's when they spend all that time on the company website and they look at what would I actually get if I joined here. So it is part of that decision-making process. We're kind of being naive if we think people aren't interested in that stuff. They just want a job. So yeah, that's really helpful, Vicky, and that element of choice. And I think one of the joys of modern technology is that choice is available even in SMEs. Like, 20 years ago, it wouldn't have been. But again, today it is that people can access that flexible system to give individuals what they want. That's the message that keeps coming through, isn't it? So the needle in the haystack, we've got all these applications, we've done a good website, we've drawn people in, they've had a good job advert, they kind of know what the job looks like. Now we've got to take our 20, 50, 100 job applicants and shake them down, metaphorically, to a handful for interview. So I've been playing Guess Who a lot with my daughter. Do you remember that game with the flips? There is an art to asking good questions and filtering responses, as we know. And do they have orange hair, which is a favourite question in our house, is not going to cut it. So, Hayley, you're interviewing every day. What mistakes do you see employers making when they're trying to select the right person to hire?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is lack of planning. I think, if you're not planning well, that shows. I think good quality questions and maybe the lack of them doesn't help, because we have to remember interviews are obviously two-way experiences. And whilst it does work for the client, it might not always work for the candidate. And I think, actually just rooting back to a fair and consistent process. And equally, I think because of the volumes at the moment can be so high for certain roles, it's thinking more about, CVs are black and white, and they're on a piece of paper, and actually going beyond that, sometimes you're shortlisting. You need to think about, is the CV from AI, and so is this actually reflective of who the person is? But also, if it's not, then are we shortlisting on the basis of what we like on a CV, or are we shortlisting based on the actual experience and transferable skills of the person? So yeah, I think in terms of the mistakes, I think Planning is really key when you're interviewing. If you're like rushing from one interview to another, or you've had a busy day and you haven't had time to prep that CV and know what you're talking about in terms of that candidate's experience, it really shows. And the candidate market's very good at the moment, and they have got choice. So you just need to make sure that planning is really on point.
Yeah, thank you. So planning. And Ben, let me ask you about process, particularly process to cope with volume. How do smart employers do this brilliantly, manage all of those applications?
So I think it depends where you are as an employer. So, I'll deal with some more SME based organizations who don't have a great deal of internal resource. And I think it's really important to rely on external support in that situation. I think recruitment can consume a heck of a lot of time if you don't know how to do it well. So that's one thing I would definitely say is, don't take on that burden yourself if you're not employing somebody to do that, or it's not your role. But it is a case of sort of fail to prepare to fail with regards to getting this bit right. And so the beginning of the process, what will often happen is, oh, we need a new I don't know, we need a new parts assembler. Okay, let's put a job description for a parts assembler. We don't do the full process. We don't identify the capabilities, how we're going to assess them, the stuff that Hayley mentioned. We just kind of find something on the internet, say that's the sort of thing we need, put an advert out for that. It's all shortcuts, which is going to make the process longer down the line. That's the bit that we need to get right at the beginning. When we create a job role or we reanalyze a job role, we need to be really clear about how do we assess for this? What are the most important things? Because at that point, we can either in-house or externally much more efficiently assess against those, and then start to have a funnel, start to identify what are the things that must be in place to achieve that. What are the, so we might have one of the employers I work with, they have some online tests. And if you don't get past the online tests, they're the fundamentals. Then so that might take out 50% of the people who are coming forward, and et cetera, et cetera. So we look at when we're in a situation where we're getting hundreds of applications, we're looking at creating a funnel that will then bring through the people that we want to spend our time with, conversing with, et cetera, or spend line managers' time with. The other thing to that process is consistency. If it's not the same things that we're looking for by the same skilled people who are looking for every time, we're not going to get the same results. So a really good applicant tracking system, a really good partnership with recruitment support if you need it, but fundamentally planning in advance and knowing what you're going to look for is a key to that process. And we can move from 500 applicants down to 20 applicants very quickly if we've got that funnel right.
Yeah, and I think what's nice now is we can do things like transcripts of interviews, especially if they're on Zoom or Teams. A lot of people that are doing first round interviews, you can get the transcripts and just cut down some of that like admin dead time because you get the transcript. You can even take that next step and feed it through AI and put your job description in and ask for some comparisons. Obviously, we're not wanting to outsource any of that wisdom and decision making to AI, but using some tools, even as an SME, can really help, can't it, with that filtering?
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. So look, we're going to assume now there's been some good filtering of CVs. There's been some great interviewing questions, and we've been quite rigorous. We've done, some evaluation. We've used the same questions for each candidate. We found somebody. They've said yes. But we know the hard work starts from the moment they walk in the door. It's certainly not job done with recruitment, and it continues through their employment. So let's talk about how great employers make people feel they've joined a special company, a good company, and that they hold on to that motivation, new job, new opportunity. And what we want is for that person to sort of lift, not maybe let that magical motivation at the beginning evaporate. So Ben, I know you've said before that onboarding is one of the most underused retention tools. Nice catchphrase, really. Can you give us an example of that where onboarding has really changed how new hires settle in?
Yeah, I want to give a little gem first that Ali, we were at the People Puzzles conference last week, and one of our speakers gave a great example of one of their clients who used an astonishment interview. So this was like 2 weeks in to a new hire coming into the business, and they did an astonishment review. What was it that has wowed? What is it that has wowed you about this organization in your first 2 weeks of being here? Know your wow is what I've put down here. Know your wow. Know what it is that makes people go, this is a special place to be, because you've got to leverage that in your onboarding process leading up to it and beyond it. So that's a nice little takeaway, I think, because I kind of came away from the conference going, oh, I'm going to do that with more of my clients.
Might they also be astonished about some terrible things, though?
Yeah, there might be. There might be. And that's not a bad thing. We like to learn.
That probably helps you identify, though, doesn't there, in the onboarding process, what improvements can we make? And again, it's then always moving forward. It's always looking at how can we be better? What feedback are we getting? And bad feedback, whilst we don't like it, often can actually be really beneficial in then knowing, that's what we need to do next time so that the next person has the better experience.
Absolutely. It's all about continuous improvement and growth, isn't it? And knowing how we need to improve and get better. But onboarding, absolutely fundamental. And again, it goes back to the point I think I was making previously which was prepare for this stuff. So, a lot of employers are going to onboarding consists of laptop login, show around the building, fill your boots off you go. I'll talk to you at some point when we bump into each other next. So being much more aware about, okay, what is it that we want to induct this person into? What process do we want them to experience? That employee journey, mapping it out. So having a welcome plan before day one. I encourage teams that I work with to have that, week one plan filled out, the diary filled. It's not finding things to do. It's planned and it's intentional. Maybe bringing in buddies from another department from day one, structured check-ins. So I would say, week one, it's daily, then weekly, then monthly. We're checking in, we're making progress. And where we've done that within clients, so within a specific client that I work with, we've really tightened up on that onboarding process. And we've seen the retention in 6 months, or the attrition in 6 months halve. We've seen the productivity and the speed to productivity increase massively, because it's all intentional. When we bring somebody in, we want them to have the best experience possible in order that they can give us the best that they can. I think it doesn't. The moment somebody says yes to a job offer, the job isn't. You don't tick that bit on your to-do list and say, job done, I can forget about that now. That's the start of the next part of the journey, which is how do we now get the most out of them and introduce them in a way that's going to make them their best.
Yeah, and I love that metric, speed to productivity. I think we might have to add that one in at People Puzzles.
Yeah.
What a great idea. I've not actually come across someone measuring that before. And actually, if you're an SME or a mid-sized firm that's only hiring 5 people a year, this is still worth your time if you actually think about metrics like that. Thanks, Ben. That's brilliant. Vicky, employee benefits, they can really get treated like a tick box exercise, pensions, healthcare, done. But I know you've seen businesses use benefits as part of a bigger story about care and culture. You talked about values earlier. Have you got something, part of onboarding that in action for us?
Yeah, I think consistency in terms of the benefits actually is a really huge part here. And the ones that really do, it's not just that checklist. Like you said, it's like, we offer this, we offer this. Now, don't get me wrong, there is an element that companies want to consider in terms of how competitive are you in the market? Because if I'm looking for a role, like now, I would not go anywhere that didn't provide me with private medical insurance, because I've used my private medical insurance. I need to go in, I had to have something done on my hip. It was really easy. I didn't have to have any time off work. For me now, that's formed part of you can pay me more salary, but I still want to know that you consider me enough to put PMI in place if I need it in the future. So it's providing a consistent approach. When someone joins, to Ben's point, you have the onboarding. Here are your benefits. You'll know about these because we've probably talked about them in that interview stage and where it's come up. So you get them. But then if we just talk about that right at the beginning and then nothing else happens, that they're on the hub, they're on the intranet, you can go and find out. Again, the value in terms of that, me feeling like the benefits I have are part of the culture of the business isn't there. Whereas where I've seen clients who have continued to form it as part of their strategy. So it's not just part of their people strategy, it's their ongoing business strategy as well. An example would be, I had a company, and this, to be fair, with COVID, they were like, what can we do? We think we've been failing a little bit in terms of the benefits forming part of the culture. We want our people to feel valued. We want them to feel excited by what we put in for them. And we also want them to know that it's there to support them. So linking in with the nutrition aspect of one of their benefits, they started doing little recipe cards. So where people are at home, like the recipes were healthy recipes and they didn't have too many ingredients. I must say, this very much appealed to me. I'm not a cook. So I was like, fabulous, a healthy meal that doesn't take a lot of ingredients that I can do, amazing. And then they linked it to the nutrition benefit that they had and said, don't forget, if you want to know more, you have access to this. They started doing chair yoga. So for everyone that was sat at home, and this is obviously for everybody, we're all probably sat down right now, but for them people who do still have manual roles, we know musculoskeletal is a huge impact on so many businesses. And so how do we do that? A little 10-minute chair yoga where everybody got to sort of have some exercises, like do your twists, so you're moving your skeleton. But they also then linked that to the physiotherapy remote service if you've got any pains, if you've got any niggles. And this is then really feeding into that prevention rather than cure piece. Your culture is to help and support your employees, not just put a solution in at the end if something becomes broken, but actually helping them in their day-to-day lives. And then they introduced pension workshops. So pensions can be confusing. There's a lot that goes into them. How is it going to work? What do I need to consider? I'm getting to that stage in my life now, maybe where I'm thinking about it. Or for the younger people saying, don't ignore your pension. We know that right now you can't believe you're ever going to get old. I thought the same. I loved it when you said my 20 years of experience. I'm like, that makes me feel old. But you don't believe you're going to get to that age, but you will, hopefully. And when you're there, we want to support you in making sure that you're prepared and you can have the life that you want, because it doesn't end at 60. You might think that when you see someone over that age, but no, they're having lots of fun and so can you. So the pension workshops they put forward really, encouraged thought processes across the board. And it really engaged them, and it continued with their culture. So we actually would support them each year. We would look at, what are we doing this year? What's part of that strategy that aligns with the business? And they might have things that were going on that would link in. And we would also link it with things like Mental Health Awareness Week. So in May, what should we do in May that demonstrates to our people that their families, their well-being, everything about them matters to us as a business and is part of our culture. And we saw that perform really, really well.
Yeah, so they're coming into a business that's quite holistically caring for them, living out the values, not just in clever words they say about work, but, that whole environment. It's definitely a different way, I think, of looking at coming into the world of work than many companies have quite got their heads around yet. And Hayley, you've got an interesting insight, I think, because you're talking to people every day who are trying to leave their jobs, right? So this sort of, we get a bit, I think, from exit interviews, but you're hearing the unfiltered truth of why candidates leave roles. What are the most common reasons that people walk away? And have you got any tips for us?
Yes. Well, I just actually wanted to touch back on Ben's point about onboarding. And I think there is something to be said for the power of pre-boarding. Just that check-in time whilst someone's working their notice, regular touch points and keeping that engagement going, particularly if the notice period is long. So I just wanted to add that in before we move on to this question. So common reasons, I think, going back to what I said earlier, actually, if you've sold the dream in an advert and it doesn't actually mirror what happens when you get there, that's a really big thing. I think lack of investment in terms of the onboarding and training from people that probably haven't got time themselves to be doing the training, so that hasn't been factored in or planned well. I think toxic cultures form part of it. I think it's actually sometimes even roots back to the values. And has it been a good representation of, what they're saying on their website is actually what happens when we get there. So, there's a lot of reasons. And actually one of the other ones that we see quite a lot of is just a lack of progression or actually being able to evolve within a business, particularly if you have got someone that's super ambitious and wanting to climb. But yes, they're probably the most common ones that come to mind.
What about leaving a bad manager? I mean, that's been the old adage, hasn't it? People don't leave a job, they leave a manager. Do you
It's
see
true.
that?
Yeah. It happens. And there's so many reasons I could list, Ali. I could literally be here all day, but I'm pinpointing like 4 or 5 of the top ones. But the manager one is also high up there.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, isn't it, that view that Ben's brought in about the importance of onboarding, and that pre-boarding is a nice addition to that. But yeah, if you're not living up to your job advert, to the feeling you've given people in recruitment, and I guess that's where that astonishment check-in can come in and add some
Yes.
value. Is this what you thought? Well, no, because you sold yourself as doing this and you're like that. It's brilliant. Ben, some of those reasons for people leaving jobs, have you got any response to that as a fractional people director?
Yeah, well, I find myself saying almost on a daily basis that the key to everything within people performance is alignment. And so this pre-work that we've talked about is how can we find the most aligned people with the organization and bring them in. Whenever my friends or family go for interviews, I say this isn't about how good you are, it's about how aligned you are. So my message to employers is know what you need to align with you as an organization to be successful. Fundamentally, great people stay at great businesses. That's my view. So then it comes down to what's a great business. So are we laying the foundations? We can't avoid the fact that this comes down to exceptional leadership and great line management. That's the reality of all of this. Whenever we look at the root cause of any problems we've got within an organization, it has to come back to how well is that organization led. So get our foundations right, understand what's important to us as an organization. So a lot of the work I'll do within organizations is, okay, if those are your values, how do they play through in our processes? How do they play through in our paperwork? Not just what we say and how we talk to people, but what we do and what actions we take on a day-by-day basis. So they're fundamentals. So once we've got those fundamentals right and we are a great business, then we will retain great people. And actually, we'll have people queuing up to join us rather than us having to go and fish in the pond to find them. And that's what I've experienced in organizations, and it makes such a big difference if you get that right. It's not a wave of magic wand solution. I'm sorry. It is hard graft and focusing on leadership and intentional, approach.
Well, it's funny. One of the things we recruit a lot of people puzzles, and we've got 2 people that their job is to find talent. And one of the things they said to me recently, again, it hadn't occurred to me, which is when we're trying to recruit in a new region, the pipeline is slow. So actually, you get this sort of in a local area, you can get people who've seen your job advert over the past 2 years, and then they might apply because they've it's built that awareness. I guess it's general marketing, isn't it? And so there's something about regularly going out and explaining to people who you are and what you do and the kind of opportunities that actually builds that understanding of you in an area. So I'm going to bring us on. So this last section is about future-proofing your organization for change, AI, new skills. We're asking people to have skills that we've never had to ask for before. So let's widen the lens a little bit. The smartest businesses are already rethinking how roles and teams are designed. But what about this feeling future ready? Ben, are you seeing patterns in organizations that feel future ready? Is there any stories you've got that sort of sum up how they look at flexibility, succession, the future?
Well, firstly, they've got their eyes on the horizon. That's the biggest difference. They're not in the weeds. They're not worrying about. They're not only worrying about this quarter's sales figures. They're thinking about the future of the organization as well. So that is a big differentiator. One of the things that we're seeing a lot of now is knowing the skills that they'll need to get there. So starting to pay a lot more attention to that job role analysis, and with AI coming in as well, what percentage of work, can we automate and should we automate? And as we progress as an organization, will we still need 10 of these, or will it grow to 15, or can it stay at 10? And that sort of thinking about how we analyze our skills and skill requirements in the business. And fundamentally, they are succession planning. And we have a lot of talk about succession planning, but they are doing it. They're looking not just at where are our risks with regards to development of our future employees and skills and talent within the business, but how is that evolving? So we've got a great person here now, but they won't be great at, we won't need what they're doing in 3 years' time, but they've got some fundamentals that will be exceptional over here. So putting those development plans in place. I think the biggest struggle within this is finding the capacity within your organization to do that work, because it can be so easy to focus on the stuff that pays the bills today, keeps our head above water today. But if at any point there is any capacity that we can graft into that, I think investing in it's into the future workforce and what that needs to look like is a really, really good use of time and effort at the moment.
Yeah, otherwise it'll be upon us and we won't have thought at all. Yeah. Vicky, talk to us a little bit. Can you, forward-thinking businesses, how are they using benefits and culture to build resilience and retain talent through change?
I think it's that recognition that I said right at the beginning, in terms of aligning the benefits to the staff that they have and the staff that they want in the future. So where they have an idea, they may be looking at growth. So they might have a good idea in terms of who they're wanting to bring in the future, how they want their workforce to grow, what they're looking to sort of achieve. And as I said, identifying that it's not then a one size fits all, and looking at how you can align the benefits to ensure that you are supporting people. From a technology point of view now, there are platforms that make it a lot easier for an employer to be able to offer choices and keep everything, as I said, accessible to their employees as well, but also to use them to continue to bang their drum. So if you've got this benefit program that you're putting in, and you're wanting to support your people, if they don't know about it, what a waste of time. So continuing then to engage with your employees. You'll engage with them obviously about workloads, about things that they've got to do, what's coming up. So try and incorporate then the sort of the positive side of things into it as well, in terms of how you can support them through the benefits that you're looking at putting in place. And also thinking a little bit outside of the box. You mentioned, fun enough, when you said about there being a tick box, you sort of said pensions and you said healthcare, which is the things that, again, people think about. But there are so many other things out there as well that can really provide benefits, not particularly expensively either, but just be something that can really engage and speak to people. So that's exactly why you have people like us, because we're there thinking, right, let us get to know your business. And that's a big part for me. Once I really understand the culture of a business, what they're wanting to achieve in the future, I can really start to have an idea of how we can design a benefit program for them that is forward thinking, future proofed in terms of what they're wanting to achieve, and then provide a really good platform for them to get the best people and keep them, because they're an employer of choice. They're an employer that people want to work for.
Yeah, I think you told me before, Vicky, just briefly about you consulting with a zoo, and that that podiatry requirement, because they're on their feet all day, being really valuable. And you can see how, I mean, there's not that many zoos in the country, but something that's so specific and so relevant, you can see when, if you're looking for a job somewhere else and that's not offered, there is a real draw to the way they're caring for their staff. So I love that stuff. Hayley, recruitment is fast changing with AI and evolving skill needs. Have you seen companies adapting around thinking about roles, and are you seeing that more and more?
I would say yes and no at this point. I think there are many companies, as Ben touched on earlier, that they have historically always had the same job description for a role, and they have someone hand in their notice, or they recognise that they need an additional hire, and they literally just, for speed, replicate and say, we need this exact same person again. And with the technology advances, I do think that there needs to be that time to assess, because what you don't want is to hire like for like, and actually we get to the point where someone's in place and they're underutilized. And I think with AI, streamlining of processes, efficiencies is also advanced. I've got a colleague that is so on trend and is almost like a super user of AI, and his results are phenomenal because he's so advanced with his interest level in it, but also how it can work best for him in the world of recruitment. So yes, in a nutshell, that would be my answer on that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we're going to see more changes on that. I imagine it's going to start coming up in job vacancies a lot more. Look, we've covered a lot today. Thank you so much to all three of you. We've gone from designing the right team to keeping people engaged and inspired. And, this is about small, smart shifts that make businesses a little bit more magnetic to the right people. And hopefully there's been something today that we've covered and you thought, yeah, I can do that. That's not going to cost me much. That's not going to be very difficult. I said thank you to you already, but Vicky from Partners and Hayley from EA First and Ben from People Puzzles, we've really learned a lot from you guys. We have got a little quick, I'm just going to share. If you would like to complete, there we go, hold on. Has that come up? So if you want to scan this QR code, then you can fill in our quick survey and find out a little bit more about the talent advantage. We'd love to hear your feedback. If you want that QR code emailed to you, can you just put a 1 in the comments box? If you would like to get the session summary and some resources from us, type a number 2 in the chat box. And if you'd like to arrange a one-to-one with anyone on the panel, we'd love to facilitate that. We're just here to help, and you can pop a number 3 in the box at the end. So we are coming into land. I've decided I'm binning any questions that have come in since, because we are out of time and I know everybody's got their next meeting to go to. So thank you so much. Please do connect with us. My final slide has just got your email addresses on, and there's another QR code there if you want to book a follow-up call. But otherwise, we will be in touch. We've got the recording available, and we would really love you to share that. If there's anyone who wasn't on the call today and you think this would be valuable to them, then please do send that on. So thank you so much for joining us. It's been great to spend an hour with you over lunch, and I hope you have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye.